Marcus Garvey is often misunderstood for many reasons. One of the biggest reasons why Garvey is so misunderstood is because he operated from a perspective of independent nationhood. Marcus Garvey did not operate from a religious narrative, nor did he operate from an integrationist narrative. The Marcus Garvey movement, the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, was not a government or a church. It was not an organization or a church. It was a government in exile. The UNIA was built as a government by Mr. Garvey, waiting for that opportunity of when we could repossess ourselves of Africa and of all African territories around the world. It was a government. When you talk about Garveyism, you have to talk about the heart of Garveyism, which is repatriation. To go back to Africa and to build it up. Some people say, why waste your time with that? After Garvey died in 1940, June 10th, and after Garvey was deported from America in 1927, almost every organization that came after Garvey took us away from our African identity, took us away from our African consciousness, took us away from our African loyalty and substituted it with a religion or a false identity. But brothers and sisters, I'm here to say that Garveyism is still alive and well. The heart and soul of revolutionary Pan-African nationalism beats as hard today as it did in Garvey's day. Africa must be for the Africans. Garvey said, if Europe is for the European and China for the Chinese, Africa must be for the African. And brothers and sisters, why do we never give up our right, our birthright to be an African? It's because only a fool would concede his control to the most minerally rich land on the face of the earth. Africa has more than 50% of the essential minerals of the planet. For those of you who are engineers and scientists, you know that there are 3 to 5 metals that are absolutely necessary for the creation of an atomic weapon, and it can only be found in Africa. For those of you with a cell phone or a laptop, you know that inside that device is a mineral known as coltan, and 50% or more of the world's coltan is made in Africa. The world cannot exist without Africa, so why is it that the American Negro thinks he can? You will always be second place until you recognize that respect is only given to people who identify and stand in solidarity with their international homeland. There was a tragedy, the Atlanta massage parlor murders, where a European walked in and murdered about 7, 8, 9 Asian women. Immediately following that tragedy, the newly elected president, Joe Biden, newly elected Vice President Kamala Harris, took a flight down to Atlanta and had a personal meeting with the Asian community of Georgia. Now, when Trayvon Martin was murdered, the black community didn't get a personal meeting with the president. When Breonna Taylor was murdered, the black community didn't get a personal meeting with the president. When Philando Castile and Sandra Bland and Tamir Rice and Eric Garner, and we could go on and on, when they were murdered, we didn't get a personal visit from the president. Why did the Chinese get one? Because the Chinese are represented by a nation known as China. And if America allows police or anybody else to get away with killing Chinese, there will be consequences and repercussions from the nation of China. There's Chinese gangs in America. Why don't the police kill off the Chinese gangs like they do black gang members? There's still Jewish gangs in this country. There's still Irish gangs in this country. Arabs have gangs. Why don't they get killed at the same rate we get killed? Because they are represented by nations. America doesn't want to suffer the consequences of disrespecting the ethnic national of another nation. But black people are killed, incarcerated, miseducated, and the white man doesn't think twice about what he does to you. Why is that? Because there's not a country on the planet Earth that's going to pick up the phone and take your defense. Who's going to call for black America? Is the president of Ghana going to pick up the phone? Is the president of Nigeria going to pick up the phone? Is the president of Jamaica going to pick up the phone? Is the president of Ethiopia going to pick up the phone? No, and why not? Because we have stopped identifying with Africa, and we have stopped building diplomatic relationships with our ancestral homeland. The Honorable Marcus Garvey said, a strong man is strong everywhere. A strong man is strong everywhere. I can testify to that. Having traveled to every continent in the world except Australia, having spoken to every major black population on this planet, I can tell you that everywhere I go, the black man and woman is on the bottom. You're on the bottom in America, you're on the bottom in the Caribbean, you're on the bottom in Central America, you're on the bottom in Europe, you're on the bottom in Asia, you're even on the bottom in Africa. But I never see the Chinese on the bottom nowhere I go. I never see the European Jew on the bottom nowhere I go. I never see the Arab on the bottom nowhere I go. Only the Negro. Only the black man and woman of the greatest continent in history. Only us are always on the bottom. And you know why? We have not made up our minds to get up off that bottom. Marcus Garvey said, you are where you are not because your skin is black, but because you have chosen not to organize yourself. The Honorable Marcus Garvey said the greatest weapon used against the Negro is disorganization. The white man is the most organized. The Chinese is now surpassing the white man in organization. And the Chinese are now the world superpower, whether the white man administers it or not. The Chinese are number one. The white man is number two. The Arab is plotting and planning to become number three. And the black man is in church praying and at the mosque praying. You ain't building anything. You're not doing anything. And that's why we are where we are. And I don't have a problem with you being in the church. Garvey was a Christian. I don't have a problem with you being in the masjid. Malcolm X, child of the Garvey movement, was a Muslim. But what are you doing besides waiting on God to change your problems? If you think God is going to solve your problems will never get solved. And why is that? Because God gave you everything you need to solve your own problems. Your issue is you're too lazy and too scared of white folks to make a difference. Look at what goes on in these schools right here in Macon, Georgia. Look at all the black boys in special ed. Look at all these alien ideologies being pumped into our babies' brains. Look at all the learning disabilities. Look at all the ADHD, the conduct disorders. Look at all the misdiagnosed autism and intellectually disabilities and emotional disturbances. Why is that? Black people spend $2 billion on Air Jordans every year. We ain't got no schools. $12 billion on liquor every year. You ain't got no schools. $800 million on chicken, turkey, beef, and pork, but you ain't got no schools. Over $3 billion on video games, but you ain't got no school. We could talk about racism, but Marcus Garvey said sooner or later you got to look in the mirror and ask yourself why you are accepting second-class citizenship on the planet Earth. Nobody gave the white man control of this planet. He took it, and you let him take it. So you are just as responsible for being on the bottom as he is being on the top. And the eternal sin of African people continues to be perpetuated. And that is the colorblind consciousness of the black man and woman of the planet Earth. You still refuse to see color. Everybody else can tell you black, but you can't tell they not. One of our biggest issues as a people is we feel uncomfortable dealing with the question of race. We say race don't exist. Who told you that lie? If race don't exist, why can they dig up a skeleton and look at a skeleton and tell you whether that skeleton was an African or a European? If there's no such thing as race, why they can look at a heart and tell you if this is the heart of an African or the heart of a European? If there's no such thing as race, why they can look at the brain, the kidney, the liver of a human being and tell you exactly where they come from? Race is real, but you don't want to admit it because you think it makes you inferior to talk about race. Marcus Garvey said 2 words: race first.